It is time for another planting video. That's up next. Hello everyone, this is Dwayne with Edge of Nowhere Farm, and we're coming to you today. It is January 9th, 2021. So we have been planting trees already here at the beginning of the year, kind of finished with planting trees and started with planting trees. And of course, this time of year, what we're really dealing with is bare root fruit trees. So we have 4 trees we're gonna be putting in the ground today, 2 different types of trees, and each one of those we've got 2 varieties. We got a few spots you can see that are laid out here that we're working in our western orchard. Back here, we have a couple different types of trees. Over here to this side, looking through the mess for today, you'll see we have 2 almond trees there. Those are all-in-one almond trees. Fantastic producers for us here in Arizona. So we're gonna actually be trying out 2 more almond trees here that are varieties we have not tried before. So this here will be a Nonpareil almond, and right behind me there will be a Ne Plus, or Ne Plus, N-E-P-L-U-S almond. That will be there. These will cross-pollinate each other. And we're also gonna be putting in 2 different types of persimmon trees. So as you go further back, we'll have 1 persimmon tree in the same line as these 2 almond trees. That will be a chocolate persimmon. And next to that, right behind the 2 all-in-one almonds, that's actually going to be a Fuyu persimmon, a standard Fuyu persimmon. So we've been prepping the ground. You'll see we have the wood chips down here. We've been watering them in about once a week or so. And really that's mainly just to make sure that the ground is softer in order for us to kind of work in here and get these trees planted. Now these are bare root trees. We actually purchased these trees from Willis Orchard, and we've been healing the trees in for the last, 3 weeks or so as of today. So of course, before we get going here, we need to go ahead and grab those trees. So let's go over and take a look at the trees we're gonna be planting today. Here are the 4 trees that we're gonna be planting today. We have our 2 almond trees here, and we have our 2 persimmon trees here. So all I'm gonna do is just pull the wood chips back so that we have the bare ground. It's nice loose soil, so they should just pull right on out. We have these now, they're soaking in a mixture of vitamin B1 and just straight water. So we want to get these in here as quickly as possible to make sure we rehydrate these roots as much as we can. They've been sitting in moist soil, so the soil moisture has been retained for the most part, but we want to make sure now that these can uptake as much water as possible and remain viable, because of course the goal, and the fingers crossed, is that a couple months from now, these break bud and take off. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and remove the wood chips and start getting our holes dug and prepped to get these trees in the ground. We have the holes dug, and you saw us testing just to make sure the tree was gonna fit in there. We kind of chunk out sides of dirt to make sure those longer stretches of roots, wherever they may go, are gonna have plenty of space to kind of stretch out and get started. But holes are dug. Now what we're gonna do is we are gonna amend the soil. Now, if we were planting a potted tree, we wouldn't do any amendments. It would go right into the ground and we'd be done. However, we are gonna slightly amend this, about 30 to 50%. We'll amend the soil. We need to soften that up, also give a little more nutrition in that soil, because these roots, the small feeder roots and hair roots, are gone. So we want to make sure they have plenty of space to kind of stretch their legs and get started before they wind up hitting our hard dirt. So what we're going to be using is the Kellogg's garden soil. Very easy to find this. You can get it at Home Depot or Lowe's, so very simple and basic. Again, we'll amend this and get this ready for planting. We have the soil amended, and now we're actually ready to plant our trees. It's been about an hour or so that those have been soaking in that vitamin B1 water. So I think we're good to go ahead and get those out of that water and get them into the ground. Now we talked a little bit about the soil amendment, and when you see us planting these trees, you'll see us doing this. This is nice and pliable, very, very loose soil, and you need this because you need to make sure that you don't have any air pockets around all of the roots. You've got just mass tangles of roots in there, and we'll spread them out to an extent. But there's usually also a space right underneath the trunk below the crown where the roots come out that will actually have an air pocket if you're not careful. So we've got nice loose soil that we'll be able to pack in there. Now you'll also see us using this here. Now this is water that we have mixed with vitamin B1 and fish emulsion. So that will give some nice nutrition, also some soil biology down inside the hole. So we'll put a little bit of that in the very bottom of the hole, and then you'll see as we go and we're filling in the dirt, periodically we'll fill and tamp that dirt in just a little bit along with that water. Before we wrap up here and move on to the next tree, I want to point something out that's very, very important whenever you're planting trees. And actually it's a little bit easier with a bare root fruit tree. Now this tree had very shallow roots, which is okay. We encourage our tree roots to grow out. It's much easier in our hard soil. You get down a couple feet, you got almost solid rock with our caliche. So we really want to encourage them to grow out. Now this one, as Lori comes in a little bit closer, you're going to see we have our root crown right here. So very easy to see it on a bare root tree. And you can see our ground level is actually probably about there. So we've got this about 1 inch to 2 inches, and that crown, you could argue that it's there. But we got 1 inch to 2 inches of space where this is actually higher than ground level. Now this will continue to settle a little bit as well and essentially be at ground level. What you definitely do not want to do is you do not want to have this below ground level because again, it's going to settle a little bit. We're planting this chocolate persimmon. You can see it's a little out of whack here, but we're trying to make sure that the trunk is as straight as we can get it. We'll actually come back, we don't normally stake bare root fruit trees, but we'll come back and stake it so we can angle this and kind of train it up a little bit. What I wanted to point out was how we have this hole shaped. If you can pick it up, there is a root that comes out here and it stops about here. So we actually dug this hole so that we could actually accommodate that root and have it start growing again away from the tree itself. Back to depth, you can see our last root here is a couple inches above the soil line. So a deeper taproot on this persimmon tree. And then as we're putting the soil in, I'm just kind of lightly tamping this down to hold this tree in just a little bit. Just like that. And then nice and snug over here with that extra root that we had going this direction. So we're gonna go ahead and get this tree wrapped up and then we'll come back to you. Next step for us is going to be to go ahead and install our irrigation system. So what you're going to see us doing is creating an inside channel that's immediately around the root system for this tree. That's going to create a swale and a berm to allow water to penetrate in to water this young tree here. You'll also see us doing a secondary swale and berm or channel on the outside that will be the eventual expansion of these roots out into that outside ring, which will allow this tree to grow even larger. And then of course it'll connect to our 1/2 gallon per minute bubbler that we have here, and you'll see us create the channel that goes to that double ring essentially here for this tree. So we've got some work to do. One of the things I am going to be using will be my Sun Joe tiller. I love that little guy. We've got it attached to with a couple of extension cords, and we're going to utilize that to break up this hard soil to allow us to create these rings. We We have the trees planted. Now we've got a couple more things that we want to take care of before we get them caged. Now we do cage these trees, and the main reason is because of rabbits. Jack rabbits in particular will just mangle these trees. We've also had an issue with coyotes coming and kind of digging actually quite a bit around the trees. We don't want them digging the trees up either. So before we get them caged, we're going to take care of two things. First thing is going to be painting. We are going to paint the trunks of these trees. Out here with the harsh sun, we have a tendency to get sunburn on trees. This will protect the tree trunks until we have a chance to get that foliage that will eventually protect the trunks. I also am going to have to stake one of the persimmons, that one that was kind of bent sideways. I'm going to do that. But more importantly, pruning. Now, when they cut these trees out of the ground, they dig them up, cut the roots off. The majority of the roots that go out from the tree have actually been lost. Now, the tree itself, so the trunk and branching that's above ground, was supported by a much larger network of roots. These trees will not be able to support that. In fact, we've already seen a little bit of dying back on a couple of these. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back through and we're going to prune them. Now, one of the things that we are challenged with here, typically I like to prune the trees at about 2 to 3 feet, and I'll probably do that about the same this time around. But we're also challenged with having to keep these 3-foot cages on them, so we will have a slightly larger trunk than I typically would want to do. So I'll be cutting the trunk down, we'll be painting the trunk, and I'll be staking that one persimmon tree. Like that, we are done. So you can see the persimmon here, I decided to go ahead and attach it to that T-post, was able to get that nice and straight so it'll help train that trunk. One of the things that was kind of neat when I was cutting those pieces of trunk off, I was kind of scratching the surface of the piece that I cut, nice and green on that cambium layer, so really hopeful that these trees come a couple months from now are going to spring back to life. So just want to thank you for joining us today. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. Any questions or comments, leave those in the comment section down below. In our Amazon shop, I'll leave a link down in the description. That is a free, painless way to help support the channel. If you start with that link, it doesn't matter what you buy, you help us support us here. So just want to thank you for joining us today and remind you, if we can farm on the edge of nowhere, so can you.